Good evening, YouTube. Today I'm going to be talking about a trip that I had the first time I had made cannabis cookies. This was back in July 2015. So I was talking to some people at work. They said you just make this butter. So I looked it up on Google, and I basically cooked cannabis and butter in a jar for a few hours. And I made it into cookies, and everybody consumed some. I was basically playing Grand Theft Auto with my sister. She's over in another city. And I said, after my first cookie, I'm getting kind of tired, so I'm gonna lie down. So I turned off the game and I went to go lie down, and I was in a kind of half awake, half asleep state. And after that, I started seeing things in my sort of half awake, half asleep state. And I thought they were pretty interesting. Basically, I sort of saw like the human body, and there are all of these little units of light inside of the human body, and they're just like little balls of light. You know, it's just little balls of light, and there's hundreds or just a lot of them. And basically, the concentration of how many of these little units of light depends on how much or how pleasant the situation is for a person. Like that's what I saw. Like, the more pleasant the situation, the more of these units of light live in your body. When something unpleasant happens, like you crush your hand or something, all the units of light will leave that area of the body. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. So like a pleasant situation will cause these units of light to accumulate in larger numbers, and an unpleasant situation will cause these little units of light to dissipate, to fly away, you know. And you know, that was pretty cool. And so I was basically seeing that after I consumed these cannabis cookies. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. I saw a bunch of other stuff. Like, it was like a real regular trip. It was like it was like the voice in my head just saying like, this is the entire universe. And it was like this sort of multicolored rainbow, like, it sort of looked like chrome, like how chrome has like a sort of sheen to it, and when you look at it from a certain angle, it has like a rainbow color to it. Or like if you've ever dropped soap into a puddle or grease, and it creates that sort of rainbowy formation. And so universe is supposed to look like that. And I also saw like a totem pole that sort of went upwards, and it's like, this is you, you know, this is how you are. I don't know if I can explain that very well. It's like you're sort of like a totem pole with all these levels to you, and it was pretty interesting. So I guess I compare these little units of light to, like, the first thing I compared them to was like squirrels in a tree, and like they sort of live inside of you. And, you know, like a pleasant situation will bring more squirrels, and an unpleasant situation will send them away. So after this trip happened, I don't know if I remember if there was any other stuff to it, but after this trip happened, I told everybody about it, and I thought it was so cool. I told my mom and my sister, and you know, they thought it was pretty cool. But you know, I thought it was like bullshit. I thought it was just like a sort of cool little fantasy. And then, oh man, And then a month later, I'm sitting on the couch, and my sister comes up, or my sister's sitting on the couch across from me. She's reading this book. It's called Think and Grow Rich. I'd actually bought it a few years earlier, but I couldn't read it because it was just too boring. And so she was reading this book that I failed to read, and she starts reading this one page. Oh no, what I said to her was read it out loud, because, you know, sometimes I'm just sitting there and I get bored. So I asked her to read it out loud so I can see what she's reading. And so she literally, like, described my trip exactly. This book that she was reading was just describing my trip exactly. And it was written by Napoleon Hill. I think he was like a big media mogul or something. I guess he just amassed all this information about people who would grow rich. And he had all these sort of weird mind games too in the book. And he he describes this mental exercise where you imagine there's a council of people in your head, and you could just pick historical characters, like, I don't know, Einstein or Thomas Edison or Gandhi or Carl Jung or something. And he basically created all these characters in his mind, and he would have talks with them in his head. And one day he said that, like, they became too real at one point, and they started telling him things that he wasn't, like, aware of, and they started doing strange things in his head, and it would just sort of happen. And so one day, Thomas Edison, like, literally, he had Thomas Edison in his head in these mind games. Thomas Edison says to him, "You're very lucky, because in your lifetime you're gonna have the privilege of understanding the secret of life." I'm like, wow, the secret of life. And what he describes after is just literally the trip that I had. He says, you know, there are these little units of light that live inside of the body that cling together like bees in a hive. And, you know, it just sounded so weird, because I'm like, they're sort of like squirrels in a tree. And it's like we were describing the same thing from different angles. And I thought it was the weirdest thing ever. And, wow. So that's what he described. And so I was like freaking out when she had first read that to me. I was like jumping up and down, like, what? Are you serious? And yeah, that was it. She was just describing how this guy described the same thing as me. Probably have it. Probably just read it quickly if it's on my phone. So yeah, he says in his little fantasy, or Einstein said to him in this fantasy, one evening Einstein arrived ahead of all the others. He walked over and seated himself at my left, where Emerson was accustomed to sit, and said, "You are destined to witness the discovery of the secret of life. When the time comes, you will observe that life consists of great swarms of energy, or entities, each as intelligent as human beings." Yeah, I remember saying that in the trip. Like each of these little units of light has like a personality and traits and stuff, and I just thought, that's so weird. And, you know, it just made me think of like how just being like there's all these forces pushing you, you know, like, I guess it reminds you of all the people in your life that sort of have, I guess, expectations for you, or they rub off on you in a little bit, and they sort of push you in different directions in that method. So yeah, these units of light group themselves together like hives of bees and remain together until they disintegrate through lack of harmony. These units have differences of opinion, the same as human beings, and often fight amongst themselves. Yeah, it's like you could create like a disharmony in the body. The meetings which you are conducting will be very helpful to you. They will bring to your rescue some of the same units of life which served the members of your cabinet during their lives. These units are eternal. They never die. Your own thoughts and desires serve as the magnet which attracts units of life from the great ocean of life out there. Yeah, I remember, yeah. So like the universe looked like this monochrome, or this chrome ocean of sort of rainbowy colors. It just looked like an ocean. The other members of the cabinet began to enter the room. Edison got up and slowly walked around to his own seat. Edison was still living when this happened. It impressed me so greatly that I went to see him. I told him about the experience. He smiled broadly and said, "Your dream was more a reality than you may have imagined it to be." He added no further explanation to this statement. These meetings became so realistic that I became fearful of their consequences and discontinued them for several months. The experiences were so uncanny. I was afraid if I continued them, I would lose sight of the fact that these meetings were purely experiences of my imagination. Anyways. So, originally I thought this trip was just bullshit, and it was kind of cool, it was kind of interesting. But just having my sister read that, like literally just 1 month later, probably 1 month to the day, I don't even know. But it was about 1 month, and it just freaked me out. Like I was jumping up and down, so excited, like this is the most interesting thing ever. And so, I guess I figured out, like, I really thought about it, you know, I really thought about this trip that I thought was bullshit originally. I really thought about what occurred in it, and I started making all these connections, and like, it basically resulted in me, just figuring things out.